Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, May 24th, 2024. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine once again. I am reminding you that this week we are taping these the night before you hear them, so there may be day confusion as we refer to today, meaning Thursday, even though you're hearing it on Friday and we should have been saying yesterday. You're going to have to forgive us, and if you don't forgive us, you'll have to not forgive us. At these prices, I really don't care. And by we, I mean executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And media commentary columnist Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
I don't even know where to start to talk about what we're going to talk about. So, yes, college presidents were back in front of the House today. And how would you guys say the three college presidents in question, the presidents of Rutgers, Northwestern, and somebody remind me of the third one?
UCLA.
UCLA. How would you say they acquitted themselves? Is there machine learning going on? By which I mean that after the disastrous first hearing that destroyed the careers of at least two of the three people at the hearing, that's Claudine Gay of Harvard and Kornbluth of Penn, and Kornbluth of MIT is the one who still had her job. And the person who lost her job at Penn, I don't even remember what her name is, and it doesn't matter because she's not going to count anymore in anything as she lost her job at Penn. Then we had the second hearing with Manoush Safik, which was an effort to not make the mistakes that were made at the first. So she made new mistakes, like saying that she had fired a professor she hadn't fired and stuff like that. And as she was speaking, that was when the encampment era began. As she was testifying, the tents started going up at Columbia, and then they were soon followed days later, mysteriously and mischievously, by thousands of Coleman tents popping up on campuses all over the country, as if mysteriously by magic.
Well, I would say that,
and so the third hearing is now the question. Just to finish, third hearing, they didn't make the mistakes that either Shafiq made or that the three horrors of the December hearing made. But did they make new mistakes?
Well, the hearings are different now because, as you point out, the story was advancing while the earlier hearings were going on. The earlier hearings were more about what kind of intellectual environment fosters this kind of horror. But because the facts on the ground became the point, because the Tentifada picked up steam over the course of this time, the hearings now are almost solely focused on a kind of managerial question. What did you do about harassment on the campus? What did you do about the encampments? Why didn't you call the police? Why did you call the police in the case of UCLA? By the way, there's both sides get blamed, and both sides say we did it. We had the better approach, and I'm sort of sorry to see it, because to me, the fact that they're now talking pretty much exclusively about how did you handle the anti-Semitic mobs on your campus is so downstream from the most important question, which is, what are you teaching these kids? Who is shaping their minds? Why does the American campus not resemble morally or intellectually anything else in the United States? And I think that is a much bigger question, and it's a lot tougher question to respond with legalese and sort of safe answers about, I won't comment on who said what, and we have investigations ongoing, and we've been punitive, and maybe we're going to be more punitive. The fact that it's now come down solely to this kind of managerial question, I think, gives these university presidents an out that they don't deserve, and it takes the focus off what, to my mind, is the main concern here, which is the poison that they are injecting into minds by the thousands, year after year after year.
Well, in the question about faculty, the questions particularly to the to Schill of Northwestern about have you suspended faculty? Have you investigated the faculty who are involved in these protests, the ones literally poisoning the mines and in supporting the encampments? Have you expelled any students? He did have to acknowledge that they hadn't expelled students yet. As you say, they're running out of clock here too, right? It behooves them not to try to get into the weeds with Congress about what they're doing. And this, by the way, this Northwestern president was also the one whose own anti-Semitism task force had to be disbanded because it was so he behaved so egregiously. The only managerial thing that I think is worth bringing to light again and again and again is the capitulation on the part of these university presidents to the protesters. So when they're questioned specifically, okay, what did you agree to? Why did you agree to that? That is useful only in the sense that each of them has capitulated in some different way. Each of them tries to gloss over that as just, oh, it's an ongoing discussion. No, it's not. You caved. You caved to these kids. You're promising them things that they will demand you deliver, and you're doing it at the expense of Jewish students who are being harassed and stalked on their own campus. So I agree that it should be still about this issue of anti-Semitism on campus and what they're doing about it, but they don't want to answer the faculty question. I assume there are, kind of contractual and legal reasons for why they don't want to do that. But that's the ultimate question. What are they going to do with these people who are clearly preaching hate? What would they do if this were white faculty preaching hate about African American students or African Americans in general? And if white professors were right there beside them, waving, white nationalist stuff and saying this. We know.
A call to heaven. What would the flag be? That would
It'd have a big pine tree on it, right?
Yes. That was the lesson that they learned from Shafiq, which made the hearing much less fun because Michael Schill was just like, he was asked why would you put this student? You have the student.
Schill's the perfect name for him, by the way. Sorry.
And they ask him like, why would you put this crazy student on the anti-Semitism task force? Look at all the things she said that are anti-Semitic. And immediately, I'm not going to speak about any individual student, And then it was like, well, do you think it's proper to have a professor like, this professor? Oh, I'm not gonna speak about any individual professors. That was like the theme of it, which was it really gave them the out. This was the first time somebody learned something big from a past failure, and this was just, you can't make me talk, because that was a disaster for Shafiq at Columbia, for Manu Shafiq. She got into, did we fire the, well, I don't think he's teaching right now. He might be at his lake house. I mean, it's just like it got into, she just answered the questions earnestly, and she was wrong on some of them. And, then she had a staff revolt, a faculty revolt. Like, what are you doing? Telling tales about us to Congress and stuff like that. So, and the other thing that the other advantage that they have is that, Abe mentioned that it's past the action point. Shafiq was like, the Tentifada was just beginning, and now the encampments have basically come down. Not all of them, I guess, but these campuses today have cleared their encampments, and so they get to posture as though they swooped in and saved the day. Michael Schill was like repeatedly, we had to get this encampment down, and it was anti-Semitic, and it was making our Jewish students feel unsafe. And so no matter, the individual sort of details of what they gave away in the deal to close the encampment, that stuff gets lost in the weeds. He gets to sit up there and say, here's why we got rid of the encampment, and here's what. And that was also the moment where he gave the only really notable quote of the day, where he was like, you may have seen, there was a picture of me with horns and blood.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he said a kind of very brilliant thing, which I think all witnesses henceforth before congressional committees should do, because it's an absolutely fabulous answer. He said, I won't deal in yes or no answers. So he's
too nuanced
he's been
for
subpoenaed. He's been subpoenaed to testify before Congress. Someone says, "Your name is Michael Schill, yes?" And he could say, I don't deal in yes or no answers, which is another way of saying it all depends on the context, right? If you say, I won't deal in yes or no answer, just that he didn't say it all depends on the context. He was expressing contempt for Congress without being actually accused of committing contempt of Congress or likely not to be convicted of contempt of Congress. But when you are called before Congress and you're asked questions, you're supposed to answer them. You're under oath, you're sworn in, and all of that. You're sort of not allowed to say, I won't answer
and he
yes
also
or no.
he deliberately misled them, right? Because the student groups that he negotiated with and gave away all these basically everything they asked for, he gave them. When asked by Congress, do you know who's behind the encampments and who these groups are? He's like, yeah, couldn't really say. Well, of course he could. He negotiated with them. How does he not know who he negotiated with? I mean, he was dissembling and very slippery and weaselly with his words. I mean, our friends at the Free Beacon have a great editorial just saying fire him. Like it's just pretty good thing. This, by the way, he was one of the first presidents to start negotiating with the protesters, setting a precedent for other college presidents to do the same. So I think he should be held in
there was a
particular
picture of him with horns and blood.
Yeah. So as a Jew,
As a Jew.
there's
he's
a lot of that.
notified that he can negotiate with them.
As a child of a family of Holocaust survivors.
there we go.
There
That
was a
one
lot
came
of
out
that.
too.
As opposed to every other Jewish family on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
Right.
Who
But he
isn't
was the
from a
first one that
family of
really
Holocaust
made it personal. Like, did you see the posters about me in that encampment?
I think what we're looking at here, again, we have to acknowledge is it's just as likely that every one of these college presidents who is testifying supports the encampments that they oppose them. They take them down on sufferance. They take them down. It's bad for fundraising. Might be bad to have them up when you're trying to get kids to commit to go to school in September. It's unsightly. You want your campus to, it's why you're there. It's a beautiful quad. It's really nice. But come on, I mean, they're righteous, they're passionate. And who's to say they're wrong? I mean, okay, they're wrong. Shouldn't say that, all Jews should die. But Israel is doing something very, very controversial in Gaza, and the response of the world has not been favorable toward Israel, and people need to. The right to protest is enshrined. It's enshrined in our Constitution. I don't know if you know that. In fact, it's the highest form of patriotism. Dissent, highest form of patriotism. They're for the ideological priors of the encampments. They're not against them. We think, oh, come on, they know they want to clear them because they don't need this, and this is all nonsense.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but in Schill's case, I think you're right, in part because of this. Every time he was asked a specific question about specific Jewish students being harassed on campus and the target of anti-Semitic threats and violence, he called them allegations. Some of these things are on video. We actually have documented proof of this stuff happening, and every time it's an allegation. Well, we have an allegation about that, and we're investigating. You don't need to investigate what is literally right in front of your face. I mean, this is why I found his testimony so well.
That's what I mean by the legalese. Every time Elise Stefanik hit him with, is it true or is it not true that a Jewish student was denied access to the quad? We are aware of allegations to that effect.
We are investigating.
And we are investigating.
The funny part was when he said, I'd like to ask you a question. And she said, no, you don't understand. I'm asking the questions, and you are sworn to answer them. This is not a colloquy or something like. She didn't say this is not a colloquy, but so it's a funny dynamic now, because basically all that they can do if this continues and they keep calling college presidents, subpoenaing them, bringing them up, is say pretty much what he said. That's why I think the machine learning is successful. Whether Schill, made an intellectual spectacle of himself with his dissimulations and his prevarications is beside the point. His lawyers and he came up with the secret sauce to get through this, which is to say, we're investigating the cases. I won't answer yes or no questions, and allegations must be taken seriously. I'll get back to you on that.
Good. Then
And
he should face what Harvard has just been faced with yesterday, a lawsuit. He should, all of these schools.
yeah, but he'll face it anyway, right? We
Right.
know that, right? The battle, the culture war battle has begun. Every one of these institutions that has stood by while their Jewish students were being abused on their own property without any effort to intercede or to prevent the abuse is going to get sued. That's where
That's the
deep
reason for the
pockets.
answers. It's a chicken or egg thing, but that's really the
Yeah.
reason was that their lawyer said, you
You
can't
can't
show up in
don't answer
you,
anything.
you can't show up in a deposition in 6 months and have the guy across the table say, you stood under oath to Congress that Jews were denied entry into certain class spaces.
Yeah. Well, by the way, he didn't say it, but Ilhan Omar said it. Ilhan Omar said she didn't see why the Jewish students couldn't walk somewhere else. So I'd like to see her walk somewhere else, right into Lake Winnetonka, with a stone wrapped around her ankle, and
The answer is because
see how
there's
long
no
she lasts.
There's no Erev.
There's no Eruv. Okay, now there's an inside joke that we're not gonna. Those who know what Seth is referring to. So that was the latest ludicrous comedy of the world of the college president. Can we? I don't think I have a tally in front of me that I can. But you realize that like 7 of the top 10 jobs in academia are now open, and no sane person would want to have them, even though this was like achieving becoming a senator or a Supreme Court justice or the head of a major corporation at one point in American life, as eminent a position as you could hold, to be the president of Cornell, the president of Harvard, the president of Penn, the president of MIT, the president of I don't know, wherever else, including Northwestern, whatever. And all
Eisenhower,
these jobs.
Democrats tried to get Eisenhower to run for the nomination first, and Eisenhower chose to be president of Colombia for 4 years,
Right.
and then run for president of the United States.
As
he
a
just came back
Republican.
from saving Europe.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm gonna be
Yeah, I'm
president
going to be
of
the president of Colombia. Now, so it's very interesting because now these jobs are being filled by factotum, yes men, and people whose gift seems to be to gull people on selection committees into giving them jobs because they fit some kind of a perfect profile and have shown some ability to raise money in previous jobs. But no one wants these jobs now. And that is where this is going. Because do you want to hold? They'll find people to be president of Harvard. I'm not worried about Harvard in that respect. But you want to spend the rest of your life in a courtroom answering charges that Harvard is guilty of Title VI discrimination? Not fun. It's not a fun thing to do. No one's going to be treating you with high respect when you're in those depositions or in those courtrooms. That, as a culture war matter, is something that not only the right, but people who are so outraged at the decline of these educational institutions should not take lightly. That the eminence of the administrations of these institutions, many of which predate the founding of the United States. Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, these are institutions that predate the Declaration of Independence, that are
Rutgers today. Rutgers and Columbia were
right.
Queens and King's College.
Yeah, exactly. So what this is these institutions are being are achieving a decline in the level of their stature, and their leadership is looking like a job that no rational person would want to have. And this is all part of the question of whether we can rebalance American life so that these people who hate America, who hate the West, who hate our institutions and who are seem to be dedicated to bring them down, whether they can be brought down before they bring us down. And there's reason for optimism here that some of that is happening. Like people are often say like we're not getting anywhere, nothing's going to happen. Like how are we going to deal with this? They're too powerful, there are too many of them. They're 200,000 people work in DEI and $50 billion is being spent on this and all of that. And I don't know, when you get to a point where being the president of Harvard is more of a disgrace than a kind of coronation, a democratic coronation. That's a pretty significant fact in the life of American institutional, academic, intellectual history that we shouldn't be poo-pooing so quickly. We don't know where Michael Schill is going to be. We don't know where Minouche Shafik is going to be. We know Claudine Gay is gone. We know that now everybody is going to get fed through that plagiarism reading machine, whoever gets a job on campus. And guess what? From what evidence we seem to have so far, an astonishingly disproportionate number of people who seem to have made their careers in academic administrations may have started their careers by copying somebody else's paper. That's a very interesting thing to know, and it creates the reputational stain that is actually helpful to the project of bringing these institutions in line with the American values that Abe, I think, referenced at the beginning, where he said none of the things that are going on in these campuses look like anything else that is going on in America and should and aren't. Speaking of things that are happening that one never really thought would happen, Donald Trump was just in the South Bronx today, about 4 miles from where I am sitting as we talk, had a big rally. A friend of mine was just at the rally. Hard to know how many people. His campaign manager said there were 20,000. Then somebody else told somebody at the New York Post there were 10,000. The New York Times counted at least 5, but that was like an hour before the rally was over. So let's say he got 10,000 people into South Crotona Park in the Bronx. According to my friend who was there, three major groups seem to be in attendance: Hasidim, or Black Hat Jews, Latinos, and blacks. Very few white faces. And what were they doing? They were chanting "Build the Wall." They were chanting "Bring them home." Apparently, Trump got into an argument of some kind with Palestinian protesters. I haven't really read the details of this. What's interesting about this is I don't think anybody thinks he's going to win the Bronx. He's not going to win New York State. But he's showing Biden and he's showing the Democrat and he's saying, take nothing for granted. You better not be taking anything for granted. These numbers in the decline of support for Democrats among blacks and Latinos, they're real. I'm going to take advantage of them. I'm going to be talking to them. I'm going to be courting them. You think you can keep them in your back pocket and just assume that they're going to come onto your team? I'm going to make you sweat for them. You're going to have to spend money on it. You're going to have to spend time on it. You're going to have Biden going to Morehouse College giving psychotic racist speeches about how evil America is to seem to want to appeal to black people. May not be what black people want to hear. Maybe it is what they want to hear. What do I know? It's interesting.
It's a very interesting use of his not abundant free time these days. To focus
free on Wednesdays.
Yeah. He's free on Wednesday to focus on the South Bronx to make a larger statement. It's really interesting. I think he has people around him saying something is happening in terms of your support where you are getting encouragement from pockets that no one thought you would get them from. And he sort of alludes to this, during his speeches. And I think it's a very important sort of marker for him to lay down, to say, I am not a white demon as characterized by the squad left. I am actually a different version of a president for all Americans, and you have to reckon with that. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing that he does. At the same time, I've got to say, I listened to a lot of that speech. I thought it was shockingly boring. I'm someone who's I can be like pretty like I
can be
laugh.
seduced by Trump, as we heard the other day. You are a ready ear for his shtick. You enjoy his shtick.
His shtick has something, but I thought this was very long, oft-told story about the trials and tribulations and the permutations of getting the Wollman Rink together. This is an old, boring story, and he went on at length about it. So I don't know that he used the opportunity, which was an interesting, clever opportunity. I don't know that he used it to the best of his ability.
Well, there's two things that you accomplish by talking to this crowd. The first is in talking to minorities in blue states and areas. The genius of that is that's who white liberals will follow to vote. In other words, like there's a whole segment of political science research that basically shows that white liberals try to vote in ways that will make them look good to their non-white fellow liberals.
Right.
And that's like the key. So one is, if he can really get these numbers moving, though, white liberals may follow. But the other is that minority communities, when you reach out to them in any one state, I think it does help in any other state where they have a significant population. Because
that is the key point, which is that, and maybe that's why it's a mistake for him to talk about Wollman Rink, which is just so people understand, is a skating rink in Central Park. It fell into disrepair. He offered to repair it and fix it up at no cost to the city, did so. And that was one of his actual few civic triumphs as a sort of builder and a presence in New York City. But nobody cares about that story. It's 40 years old. It's of no moment, and he doesn't need to waste his time on it. But if he's going around and people say, oh man, he went into this Latino neighborhood in the South Bronx and gave a big speech and talked to these people, and that's on Spanish language radio in Corpus Christi, Texas, and he gets another 750 votes out of that in Indianapolis, there are Latinos,
that's the fan. He did some interesting fan service for his base too in the speech. I mean, he actually did hit a number of things. It was boring, I think, to Abe's correct observation. It was boring in part because he was trying to hit these different things, right? And so he had to boast a little about his, supposed civic largesse of 40 years ago. He had to kind of, talk to. I'm talking to minorities in a blue state. Look at me. But the thing that struck me was the sort of the fan service bit was talking about how he talked about the migrants, because he says. It was classic Trump conspiracy toning. He's like, I think they're building an army. I think they want to get us from within. They're building an army. They have something in mind. It was the kind of thing that really gets people's, look, Trump is sort of like a walking, talking version of a social media algorithm because he knows exactly what to do to get people fearful or angry, right? It's like, and so that's both fear, anxiety, anger right there in those words, and people eat it up. And so, look, we're all concerned about who is coming across the border, and yes, there are a lot of able-bodied young men from foreign countries pouring over our border, and we have no idea what happens once they get here. So he's not wrong about the actual demographics and the reality of what's happening at the border, but it's the framing. The framing is perfectly suited to his fan base, is how I would put it.
And a very funny thing with the border happened today, where a Turkish man crossed the border and almost immediately gave a TV interview about it. And he said, this border security is terrible. It's like Swiss cheese. Like
It was incredible.
He crossed.
It was incredible.
I give it
illegally
5
crossed the
stars.
border.
5 stars.
He illegally crossed the border, and he goes on TV, and he's like, I mean, somebody's got to do something about this. This is crazy. And people were like, well, that is how good at assimilation America is, because he's already, as soon as he comes across
Yeah,
the border,
he's already pulling the
American.
ladder up
Somebody's
behind
gotta-
him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like,
I'm here,
not
let's
in my
shut it down.
backyard, buddy.
But it's like,
Right.
you're not even making it fun, But so yeah, that sort of thing is what helps him. It's like the people coming across the border are like, guys, this is ridiculous.
Look, I think what's interesting is that when campaigns are creative and they start feeling their oats and they start doing fun, unexpected things, that is a sign of confidence, or at least a sign of, I wouldn't even call it risk taking, because I don't know what the opportunity cost would have been of him giving a speech like this, unless he went there and, said, all of you are, should go back to Mexico or something like that in the crowd. But Biden is obviously doing absolutely nothing interesting,
Well,
right?
I was going to say, contrast that with what Biden did today, which is mumble and bungle his way through another press conference. I mean, he had another kind of disastrous press conference with President of Kenya or someone. It was bad. It was bad.
Yeah, and I just mean, like, it's when to play his history games in 1988, when it was reputed that George W. Bush was 17 points behind Michael Dukakis, which was obviously absolutely preposterous and just a horrible massive polling error. But Roger Ailes, who was then helping to run the George H.W. Bush campaign, went to Bush and said, look, we're losing. We got to do something interesting. And, the Democrats are like, they're uncomfortable with the flag. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend 3 weeks every single day. We're going to go to a flag factory. We're going to find every flag factory in America. We're going to go flag, and you're going to walk around. You're going to wave the flag. And you're going to stand there while they manufacture a flag. And you're going to do this, and you're going to do that. Meanwhile, so as time is going on, this is biting. Bush is doing this. No one's ever done anything like this before. The Dukakis campaign starts getting worried. They're making him look unpatriotic. They stick him in the tank. They stick him in a tank. So he's in this like one man tank. His little head is popping up out of the tank.
He looks like Rick Moranis.
And he says rat-a-tat-a-tat, like making bullet noises. And that was like one of those moments when you're like, all right, this is off. Like, I'm sorry, but it all happened in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then everywhere he went, not only did a flag factory, he said the Pledge of Allegiance every day, because of course, there was this whole thing about how Dukakis had removed the Pledge of Allegiance requirement or something for Massachusetts schools. I mean, I remember the details, but the point is, they were doing weird, symbolic, fun things. And campaigns are entertainments, as we know, and these were symbolic of something larger, and the American people understood it. How comfortable or uncomfortable were Democrats in 1988 with patriotic symbolism, patriotic symbols, expressions of unadorned faith in the United States and its virtues, not looking to run it down, but rather to celebrate it, particularly as the previous couple of years had been really good for America economically and in world power terms. And the Soviet Union was doing perestroika and seemed to be sort of waving a white flag and all of that. And Bush sailed, right? He sailed to victory, won by 8 points. And why did that happen? The campaign exuded some sense that it was playing on a larger American playing field and that it had something, even though people were so contemptuous of it and thought it was all the worst kind of politics and all of that, it had something to say about America. And Trump did say this today, right? Very plain. It's not any particularly interesting thing for him to say, we are all Americans, whether we're black or white or brown. We're all Americans and we're all in this together. But that's not something that he's ever said before in quite that way. And Biden just went to Morehouse College and said, African Americans, you may not really feel like you're full Americans, and I have total sympathy with that idea. And gee, I'm so sorry. And contrast the two messages. Who's got the message that says something optimistic about the future, talking about change and all this? And again, I'd say this as somebody who was not a fan of Trump's, but his campaign has a pulse, and Biden's campaign does not have a pulse. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, it's a gimmicky thing to do. He took a car 3 miles into a park and gave a boring speech. It's not anything anybody should be celebrated for. It's not like an incredible explosion of genius campaigning. It's just, hey, I got a good idea. Let's go and give a speech in the South Bronx. Okay, we'll do it. Can we get it up in like 3? Sure. Well, yeah. Well, where do we go? Well, there's this place, South Gratona Park. It's we can go there and get a permit. We'll just do it there. Okay.
John, I totally agree that it's not a genius piece of campaigning, but it is a piece of a larger sort of move in his campaign that I would say it's genius, but is somewhat inspired, which is the thing that we have said about Trump, forgetting whether we like him, whether we like how he governs, whether we think he's a good person, but the practical criticism that we've leveled at him rightfully for a long time is that he doesn't expand his base. He doesn't expand his audience, right? And he's been doing that in different ways, even by embracing Doug Burgum or whatever it is. He's not in a defensive MAGA crouch exactly. Right. And that manifests in different ways, and this is one of them.
I mean, this is a very important point because literally from the day that he won the election, or the day after he was inaugurated, what Abe is referring to, which a lot of people have only recently joined the podcast. So this was like 2017. We had just gotten started with the podcast. We were doing it 2 days a week. Not many people were listening, but one of the major points that we hit over and over and over again, I did, Abe did, Noah Rothman did, Sohrab Ahmari did when he was on, all that was, look, Trump lost the election by 3 million votes if you count nationwide. And one thing you got to do is you got to get more voters. So you got to do what you can to get more voters. And that means you got to speak to a larger audience than the audience that you were speaking to. And he spent 2 years absolutely refusing to do that. And whenever he felt uncomfortable or he felt like he was under attack or something like that, he would retreat to this kind of the MAGA base, which was all fine for him. And in the end, he did expand his vote, but he didn't expand it enough. And maybe some of that was just natural population growth and the disappearance of serious third-party challenges. But this was a real theme. But when it first started being talked about that he was making a better showing with minority voters than people anticipated in 2020. And some of that came in places like the Bronx, by the way, where if you look at his totals in the Bronx, he doubled the number of votes he got in the Bronx from 20. Now, it didn't matter. He lost the Bronx by 60 points, but there were these pockets in the border counties of Texas where almost nobody lives, by the way. Like a border county, Texas can have 5,000 people in it. So if you win it, you're not winning that much, except suggestively. And that was flattering to his ego, is how I look at it. It's like, hey, they love me. Black people love me. Latinos love me. So I'm going to love them back, just like I love MAGA back. Like wrestling fans love me, so I love them. So it's flattering to him. He also has the same civic religion as everybody else, so people don't really understand this. Like, you think he wants people to call him a racist? He'd much rather be called like somebody who loves, loves all people and loves all black people. He's like a broadcaster. He wants the largest possible audience for everything. He didn't know how to do it. He didn't have a feel for it, but he's now had 8 years at the center of American public life. And he basically is now saying, okay, let's try this out. Grow it a little bigger. I'm only going into this to explain what you meant by the having to, and the thing is, like, in close states, he lost Georgia by 12,000. He lost Arizona by 10,000. He lost, so he lost Pennsylvania by 80,000. 1,000 people in per urban county in Pennsylvania who vote for Trump and not for Biden, right? 1,200 people who vote for Trump and not for Biden can win Pennsylvania for him. He doesn't have to have a huge swing of 40 points in his direction. Just has to appeal to 1,500 people in a district in Philadelphia that didn't like him before. He does that in Pittsburgh. He does it around Harrisburg. He does it in some other places.
There's also something significant about the fact about how important black voters were to Biden's initial victory. That's the other thing, is that it's black voters saved Biden and therefore the Democratic Party right in 2020. He got his endorsement and then victory in South Carolina and turns things around. And it had everybody mentioning the fact that black voters are sort of the Democrats' safety. They're the ones who think pragmatically more so than somebody who might be in a tent-a-fod on Columbia or whatever. They don't think in terms of like should I say Latinx instead of Latino. Like there's a just sort of a pragmatic way and they boosted him. And that whole thing was also, he was somebody I remember seeing black voters interviewed. Why do you like Biden? Well, he was Barack Obama's vice president for 8 years. And you know what? He was fine with it. And he was, this white guy who'd been running for president his whole life. He was fine with being number 2 to the first black president, whatever. Like there were things about Biden that were specific to him. And what Trump is doing is going after this is the bellwether constituency of Biden. This is the one that tells you if he's really in trouble, because this is the reason he's here. And without them, he doesn't catch up to Bernie Sanders in the delegates. So what Trump is doing here is he's really going on offense. And he's saying,
right.
The people who put you here, I'll take them from you. I'll fight them. I'll fight you for them.
Right. And I think the other thing here is Biden was what we were told is basically Biden was all these other white people are crazy. Bernie Sanders in particular is a crazy person. All these white people are crazy. I'm voting for Biden, because I don't need any of this crazy nonsense.
Well, and he gave us Kamala, and he promised us a black female Supreme Court justice, and he promised us this. Remember there was basically a list handed to him, like you must do all these things.
Right. Okay, so he did it. And they said he wasn't crazy. He wasn't some sort of crazy liberal with a crazy liberal agenda that had nothing to do with their lives or anything that they really wanted or needed. And now it's 2024. And like I say, all Trump needs to do is to scratch some of that away in some places by people who think the economy's crappy and they also think he's too old. And Trump's walking around saying, I love you. You're great. It's America. I love you. You know, maybe they'll say, well, this is nuts. He did what he did in Charlottesville. I don't know what they'll say, but then they'll also say, all these crazy white kids on these campuses, what the hell is that about? How's that helping me? How's that helping anybody? I mean, I'm not saying that they're like saying they're waving the flag and wanting to tear down the, encampments that are like full of Zionist, passion, but it's more like a lot of these people are nuts. And I was voting against nuts, and now Biden looks old and the economy's bad, and Trump's saying he wants my vote. 12,000 votes in Georgia wins Trump the presidency in 2020. Imagine if he had been able to do some of this with some black voters in Fulton County and a couple of other counties in 2020 in a way that they would have been able to hear, all of which was distorted and confused by COVID and all of that. I don't know. It's not, like I say, it's not a Hail Mary strategy. It's more like a kind of attrition.
Well, and he doesn't need to even engage the things that voters in polls are telling pollsters they care about. So cost of living, which is still like people really care. They really feel like cost of living has risen and that Biden doesn't know how to handle this problem, the economy broadly, but particularly their day-to-day expenses. And he has Bidenflation. I haven't heard anyone say that in a while. Sure, the Biden economic plan has not stuck. But more importantly, the more recent polls that just generally ask about his competence in governing. Like, can he do the job? And obviously age plays a huge role in this. But beyond age, it just seems as if everything he's tried to do for these things that people care about, the border, crime, and most importantly, the economy and rising costs for people, he hasn't been able to do it. And instead, what he keeps doing, and what he did earlier this week, is just give these a kind of scheme to pay off more potential voters in the form of student loan and debt transfer. Right. So he's the cost of living stuff is very, very important to a large number of voters. And he's not addressing it. He's telling them, look, I did that for you. He's just saying something that isn't real.
Right. But again, a creative campaign would say, okay, you know what? This may be an argument that we've lost, or right. we really don't have time to turn this around. So we better come up,
shift focus
with something
yes.
fun or something to got to come up with something, because we're dead in the water and Trump's going into the South Bronx. And that's what they don't, they're still betting on the come that he's going to get convicted in Judge Merchan's courtroom, or that, he'll start saying crazy stuff. Well, you know what? What if he doesn't really say a lot of crazy stuff?
And he's only free on Wednesdays to say it.
That he's, they keep trying to make it like he's saying crazy stuff, like this thing where somebody did something that had the phrase unified Reich in it on Truth Social, therefore Trump said it, because somebody on some campaign factotum retweeted something or re-truthed something, and then they deleted it. And then it's Trump is preaching a unified Reich, but he didn't say it. And that's another one of those moments where it's like, well, did he say it? Did he not say it? What if he doesn't give them the fuel that they think that he's going to give them?
Well, like the Supreme Court justice, yeah.
With?
Well, this is the same strategy being deployed against the Supreme Court justices with all the flag nonsense, with Alito in particular. And Alito should not respond. There's nothing to respond to here, because this is a big nothing. But this idea that you in fact, I think the most recent story I heard about it was, calls are growing for Alito to respond. It's like, no, they're not. You just keep repeating the same story, and there's nothing there. There is nothing there. The appeal to heaven is not a dangerous thing.
You know what I found interesting about that too, about the appeal to heaven controversy, is that the people who were responding on the right, trying to show like this is not a problematic flag, whatever, were showing pictures of Black Lives Matter rallies where they were hoisting the appeal to heaven flag with the
Yeah.
pine tree. And so, that's sort of another thing where I even these things, they're not landing, not just because they're kind of silly, but they're also not landing because, like, what if black voters are like, did they even know that we like that flag
Yeah,
too? Like, we sometimes use that flag. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like they don't know their own supposed constituency, and it kind of rankles when it becomes so obvious that as a constituency you're taken for granted.
I was completely baffled when that first Alito story came out, when it said he used a familiar sign of the January 6th insurrection. So I was like, oh no,
The
he
upside
did?
down flag, you
Oh
mean?
yeah. Oh no,
Right.
he did he? Oh my God. And then I read it and
No,
it's like the upside, and I'm like,
that's not a
the
January
upside
6th flag.
down flag is a sign of distress, is a statement about distress with the condition of America, or the sense that we should be in mourning about something, and it's been used for 200 years. Am I taking crazy pill? Like, it was one of these am I taking crazy pills moment. Did the reporters in question not actually know that the upside down flag is a traditional, a thing that means 5,000, has meant 5,000 things at different times? That it's the symbol of distress if you're at sea and you want another American ship to know that you're under attack or you've been taken. Like, granted, it's a weird thing to have on somebody's lawn, but if they didn't know and they thought that it was invented by the January 6th people, then they're stupid and ignorant and crazy, and no wonder. And they're not crazy, they're just stupid and ignorant, and no wonder nobody pays attention to the media anymore and nobody is reading them. Or if they did know, but they attempted to sort of shoehorn January 6th into this on the grounds that some people did it, and maybe that means that Mrs. Alito did it or Alito did it, then they're just playing politics. And again, what individual person is going to look at that and say the Supreme Court conservatives on the Supreme Court are supporters of insurrections
Well,
against
they
the
want
Constitution of the
Alito
United
to
States?
recuse himself in any upcoming January 6th. That the whole point is to try to get him to recuse himself,
Yeah.
forgetting, of course, that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she was alive and on the court, actually said that she did things about President Trump that she later had to apologize for. This was the kind of statement that really did go too far. She recognized that, and to her credit, apologized for it. That has been memory hold by everybody now, saying, flying a flag means you shouldn't be able to rule on something as serious as the January 6th events.
Well, we also just
Anyway, he said his wife did it.
Didn't we
love
just
this
have a
point.
Gadsden flag fight? Didn't we
Yeah.
like 6 months ago have
Right.
like New York Times reporters writing like, oh, there's this problematic flag, and it was the Gadsden flag.
The
It was,
Gadsden
don't
flag
tread
from
on me.
1785.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 1785 Gadsden flag. But my point here is two other interesting things happened. Noah, our old friend Noah, pointed this out on the Editors podcast, that Jesse Wegman, a columnist for the New York Times editorial page, said that Clarence, that one of the things that happened with Alito saying that his wife had a fight with people in her housing association, got very ugly, then she flew the flag this way, was that this was one case in which a wife was blaming a wife. And you know what? Clarence Thomas, one of his problems is excessive closeness to his own wife. This was a sentence
They
that
should be
actually
asked about this
appeared.
in any confirmation hearings in the future. Like, how close are you to your wife?
This was a sentence that appeared in the New York Times, and as Noah said, it's like, do they want everybody to think they're crazy? Is there such a thing as excessive closeness to your own wife? Maybe if you're in a throuple.
Also, I'm
or a
sorry, anyone who's dealt with the
polycule,
homeowners
as some
association
editors at the
knows.
New York
Yeah.
Times, I am led to believe, are currently in, whom I will not name, live in a polycule. So maybe you can't be excessively close to your wife if you're in a polycule, But most people don't believe that there is such a thing as excessive closeness to your wife. Closeness to your wife is what you're supposed to have if you're married. Anyway.
But by the way,
Yeah.
on just the general flag question, you guys are forgetting it was about 2 or 3 years ago where the Times ran stories about how it was around the 4th of July.
There's a really terrifying flag that flies around then, I hear.
Exactly.
I can't look at it. It's too
The
scary.
American flag is seen by a great many Americans as a racist symbol. So forget turning it upside down, forget alternate flags. The flag, Old Glory, is itself deeply suspect. If you fly a flag, you are a threat to the Republic.
You know what Alito should do next? He should kneel for the national anthem. That will really
Really mix it up.
Yeah, then we'll really get to see who can figure out the calculus of that quickly. But by the way, we shouldn't dismiss the whole story, because there was one flag that Alito flew that was actually problematic and troubling. At his place on the Jersey Shore, he flew a Philadelphia Phillies flag. So I assumed the whole time that's what the story was. I don't know. I'm watching and go, I don't know what this pine needle flag is, but the Phillies flag is enough.
Impeach. It's that simple. Okay, well, it's Friday, and on Fridays, as we promised last week, we are closing the week out with our new feature, the AI-generated song stylings of one Eli Lake contributing editor.
DJ Eli Lake is how
DJ Eli Lake, contributing editor to commentary, and this is a banger of a song. It will remind those so old that they will know what I'm referring to of a Shirley Bassey, Roberta Flack, Dinah Washington kind of soul. And it basically is a song about what happened to President Raisi upon his demise in the helicopter. So for Abe, Christine, and Seth, I'm John Budhoritz saying keep the candle burning. And here is Eli's song.
Welcome, honored Ayatollah. Smell the sulfur, see the bones. The devil wants his loyal soldiers to make our hell a happy home. Welcome, Ibrahim Raisi. No confession for your crime. Lies you told so sugar sweetly. Cover up the scream and cries. The men that you condemned torment you to no end. Ibrahim, demon fiend, the devil's still your friend. Welcome, honored Ayatollah. Meet your victims, hang your head. The devil wants his loyal soldiers by his side among the dead. Welcome, honored Ayatollah, welcome Ibrahim, Ibrahim, Ibrahim.